All right, we are back with another edition of Seminole Sidelines presented by the Osceola, the Florida State Rivals site. My name is Pat Burnham, and this is Charles. I'm joined by Charles Fishbein, our Osceola recruiting analyst. And Fish, as we've seen with the advent of the portal and everything else, the recruiting window never closes, and Florida State picked up a commitment yesterday from Iowa Western strong safety Ashlynd Barker, who's originally from Columbus, Georgia, comes in with 4 to play 4. Canceled his other offers with New Mexico State, Ball State, and he got offered by Oregon State. Had been hearing from Colorado and Indiana after he left Florida State on his official visit. So just talk about Ashlynd. If you had a chance to watch him as a player, I really like this high school film and what it does for Florida State's roster.
Yeah, I mean, they had another big body kid. We've discussed this before. I think Randy has a big impact on this. He likes longer, more athletic-looking DBs. Kid's versatile. He could probably play corner, safety. Gives him some versatility on that back end. And has some range. He can go and cover large areas of field. He's not just stuck to playing one side of the field, and you have to protect him. He's athletic enough to help out all over the defense.
Yeah, and he came in and weighed in, measured at each set a tad bit under 6'3", a little bit over 200 on the weight. He thought he was around 6'3", 205 coming in pre-visit. He's a guy that certainly looks the part as far as what you're looking for. And as a free safety, he did say after his official visit that Florida State planned to start him at what he called high safety, which I call free safety, which obviously he's an eraser on a lot of the run plays and obviously gives you deep coverage responsibility against the pass. Certainly a guy that, based on his high school film, took very good angles, closes on the ball very quickly, and I think the upshot here, as opposed to the key kid who committed to Alabama, is you've got a long-term guy here. He's got 4 years to play, 4 years. Also mentioned that Adam and Mike had told him that they could foresee him at nickel corner at some point, and they would like to try to get him some reps once he's kind of got down his responsibilities and knows the defense from a free safety role. But listen, certainly fills a position of need with the graduation of Jamie Robinson, and then obviously you had Omarion Cooper into the transfer portal and head to Colorado. And Omarion was supposed to be a start, was going to be in the 2 deep if not starting. I think that's the big question with Barker Fish is, how quickly can he acclimate? And listen, we've seen Florida State have success with playing true freshman defensive back since Mike's been here. We saw Omarion Cooper specifically have a really good ending to his true freshman year when he was forced into action, and we really thought he was going to be a star. We saw KJ Kirkland come in this spring as an early enrollee and certainly was making his presence felt before he kind of got dinged up and did not finish spring full speed anyway. So it's not unheard of for a true freshman to come in Florida State of late and play. And listen, I think it's an advantage that he's been in a junior college program for a year, went through fall practice and spring practices, had an additional time to add some strength and size. I think it's probably best for everybody if he doesn't play, right? But he may play. And how big an advantage do you think it is that he had that year in junior college to develop physically?
No, I definitely think it helps bringing in someone that is older, more experienced. Being in junior college while it's not a 4-year school, you are around men. You're not around high school players anymore. It's guys that have probably been in this school at least 2 years most of the time. So that experience and being around, getting maturity, developing both physically and mentally to the college game, it's a step up. It's not, Power 5 football, but it's still better than high school, and you get to, improve your overall skills.
Yeah. So, listen, we'll see how he does when he gets here. I'm assuming, since he went ahead and made he indicated that he would probably enroll this week in school, which summer school started, the first semester started Monday. So good for Florida State. They got a position of need, a guy that can be here for 4 years, and a guy that, quite frankly, was very lightly recruited out of high school, played, I think, 8 games his sophomore year, played half his junior year, did not go through spring because of COVID. It was his sophomore year, missed the first half of his junior year, to COVID, then came back, got back in school the latter part of the year, then obviously had a very good senior year. Got to look for some small colleges. We've got an interview with Ashlynd at theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com if you haven't seen it, where we sit down and talk with him for 20 minutes. He talks about his football journey, but said he didn't take football very seriously as a sophomore or junior, and then obviously he felt like the time that he missed as a sophomore and junior, and the spring of his sophomore year, and missing the first half of his junior year, kind of impacted his development. But listen, I think the fascinating story, Fish, and you can talk to this probably more so than I can. I thought it was interesting that his his junior college head coach recognized his talent and decided to redshirt him so he would have 4 years of eligibility. He felt like he could get Ashlynd a scholarship based off practice film from the fall and the spring, which is, as it played out, is what happened. How often have you seen that happen where a kid goes to a junior college and redshirts and gets picked up during his true freshman redshirt year at a junior college? And I think and go back to the point you made before we ran into technical difficulties, I do think it's important to point out that Iowa Western is one of the better junior college programs in the nation right now. In fact, they've played for the junior college national title each of the last 2 seasons, winning 1. So,
yeah, this kid and other kids now are doing this more often, where they redshirt that first year. It's more common just so they could get that extra year. They're a lot more recruitable. Colleges like that they have that redshirt year. I believe you saw with the Jaden Jones kid last year. I believe he redshirted and really never had, he was injured, last year, but it was based off of practice footage. It wasn't really based off of game film. So this is not something new to this staff. They trust their evaluations as far as seeing the athletic ability and how these kids fit into their scheme. And that's what they're going off of. They're going off of upside. You can't teach 6'3" corners that could run, that could turn and run and help out. And you like the matchups, especially in the ACC now. You see it with Wake Forest had big receivers last year. Clemson has big receivers. Miami had a big receiver. So you can get these guys that can match up against these guys and help shut down half the field. It really helps you with the rest of your defense and how you see them against other teams.
Yeah, I know there'll be people talking about Florida State was by far and away his biggest offer, but I do want to go back to something he said to us during his interview with us. He was getting some interest, in fact, from the University of Georgia coming out of high school. Obviously, nothing came to fruition there, but at least he was. Listen, and there's a lot of kids on a lot of schools' radars, but he did, he worked out for Kirby at one of those individual skills camps in the summer before going into his senior year. So he has been on some big colleges' radars. And as he told me earlier in the week, Colorado had reached out. Indiana was starting to call him more and more. So I think this was a kid, the longer he stayed uncommitted, was going to pull more attention. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does, but good get for Mike Norvell and his staff on Ashlynd Barker, who, for what it's worth, wants to be a veterinarian when he gets to with his football career. It was a very interesting interview with him, and seems like a great kid. Can't wait to see him in the fall. All right, so 2 weeks ago, we had Keon Coleman and Jalen Key on campus. Obviously, Jalen Key commits to Alabama and is up there, who's a safety. Fish, I had 2 pretty good sources tell me last week in relation to Keon Coleman that they thought it was down to Texas A&M and Ole Miss. Then there's reports all over the place this week. I put in his name this morning, Keon Coleman, that it's down between Florida State and Ole Miss. What are you hearing on that? What do you expect to happen?
Yeah, I've heard Keon's really interested in the whole NIL and how that will benefit him. And Florida State's been fortunate enough to land some of these kids that that's their main priority. But they've done a good job of making sure that is not the main priority with most of the kids. So here's a big-time player. We liked him a lot coming out of high school. But when you're talking about what a kid's looking for as far as NIL and stuff, this is where it becomes a little tricky because it becomes a bidding war for these type of kids. And, you also have to make sure that this kid doesn't upset the locker room. And talent-wise isn't the issue. I think they've got a lot of talent at receiver. You got to make sure this is the right fit for Florida State and what they're trying to do next year.
Yeah, and listen, I kind of talked a little bit through this with Bob and Kurt last week when we were talking about when it looked like Keon was going the other way, that it's going to be an Ole Miss Texas A&M thing. To me, if you're him, and I know there's some short-term value in the NIL, right? But if you're Keon Coleman, it's long-term value that you're looking for. Where do you go to make yourself as attractive as you can be to the NFL? And when you look at Ole Miss and Texas A&M and then compare them to Florida State's offense, my rationale was, let's say that you do get more NIL money from Texas A&M or Ole Miss, if that is the deciding factor. Well, maybe that's the wrong way of looking at it if you're Keon, because in my opinion, if he's getting the right information from the right people, this should be a long-term. This should be a short-term investment for a long-term gain. You invest in wherever you're going for 6 months because it gives you the best chance to get to the NFL. Florida State's got a more proven quarterback than the guy at Ole Miss or any of the guys that may play at Texas A&M. Florida State's offense is more receiver-friendly than what Jimbo is running at Texas A&M. And I know everybody gets infatuated with Lane Kiffin, and he's on Twitter. He's really cool. Seems like a really cool guy. Got the swag, whatever you want to call it. But to me, if you're Keon Coleman and you're talking about these three schools, the offense that gives you the best chance to shine, even though you may not get the majority of the catches every single week, is going to be Florida State, because you're going to see a lot more one-on-one matchups because of the talent that surrounds you, and then you got a dynamic quarterback like Travis Jordan. If it was just about NIL money, fine, go to Texas A&M or go to the biggest bidder. But if this is about NIL money and NFL money, I think you got to go to Florida State. What's your take on that?
It's all how you sell their programs. Ole Miss can sell that they have two of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and yes, Kiffin didn't coach those guys, but those guys played in a run-orientated offense. I just think the whole developing, and if a guy's good, they're going to find you at that school. Listen, Calvin Johnson played in a run option offense at Georgia Tech and ended up one of the best receivers ever in the NFL. So I think that whole developing side, I think it's overstated a little bit. It's all about fit and where the kid's going to feel most comfortable. He's already been developed to the point that I don't think there's much more development that's going to be had. It's going to be scheme and numbers at that point. If he puts up over 1,000 yards next year, it doesn't matter if it's the Kiffin's offense or Mike Norvell's. The kid's going to get drafted high. He just has the physical attributes that the NFL scouts are looking for.
Well, and listen, he is according to NFL draft buzz, he's a 17th best draft eligible receiver for next spring. So I think this is likely a one and done for Keon, no matter where he goes. But if that's and my argument would be, if you're Keon Coleman and this is a one and done play, you got to go to Florida State, play with Jordan Travis, be lined up opposite Johnny Wilson, and have Jaheim Bell and Kyle Marlock in between you, and a bunch of running backs that can catch the ball as well as they can run it. I just think, to me, that the short-term play for long-term success for Keon would be Florida State. Florida State, as we saw last year, any 1 week can feature a different receiver, is what the kids call wide receiver one, which is one of the reasons Micah Pittman's not here. I think that was I think he made a terrible mistake in going to Utah long-term. I think his best chance to enhance value for being a pro prospect for Micah was to stay here and be surrounded by talent and play in this offense, which would afford him some, even though he might not get the ball more than 30 times, would allow him to make some plays. But anyway, fascinating the way this has changed because, like I said, Last week I was hearing Texas A&M and Ole Miss. We're getting 7 days later, and it looks like it's down between Florida State and Ole Miss, depending on what you were hearing, and who you believe. All right, Scott, go ahead, Fish.
No, I'm waiting for you.
All right. Well, listen, I got a chance to go up to Colquitt County, Georgia last night and watch 2024 tight end commitment Landon Thomas. I will say this: you don't need a roster to figure out who he is. He just looks different than 99% of those kids. There were a couple of kids that you're like, all right, well, he's got a FBS body. It was fun to watch him. It was fun to get around. First of all, Colquitt County, Georgia. Fish, they got some money in their high schools, buddy. They got a brand new high school. That stadium is they've turned the old high school to the middle school. That's where the stadium is. Stadium's very nice. You can tell football's important there. But anyway, Landon, listen, he looked the part. He only caught one pass on the night, but he was a very willing blocker. You can see that I don't think you watch his film, you know he's a player. I don't think I'm breaking any news there, but it was fun to get out and see him, and you can see why Florida State is fascinated by him. There were several colleges there. Florida State, Chris Thompson was there, the tight ends coach. South Carolina was there. Cincinnati was there. Ironically, now listen, most of the coaches were on the visitor side near the pass gate entrance. I didn't see a Georgia coach. Not that Florida State fans are worried about that, but anyway, it was fun to watch him. We've got some video of him that Jerry and I took. We'll be putting that on the site for our subscribers. Again, that you can go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. If you're not a subscriber, that's where you can go access this video, sign up for an Osceola membership, and we'll have that video when Jerry and I get together and put it together later today. But anyway, listen, probably, and one of the reasons I wanted to kind of bring that up is to let our viewers know that we'd gone to see him. But the other part of this, Fish, was I got up there, and of course, Nye Carr is a 2024 receiver who's committed to Georgia that has been on Florida State's campus at least once this calendar year. There was a lot of buzz around some guys that work in the recruiting industry that were up there watching this game that Nye Carr may flip from Georgia, and obviously one of the schools that could include, because he's been here and he's obviously got a teammate coming, and Florida State was high on him for a while, is Nye Carr. What are you hearing on that?
It wouldn't surprise me that they were on him early. He gives them another receiver. It seems like for a school that struggled to sign receivers the last few years, they're in on a lot of these guys and they're popping up on their radar. He'd be a nice get. I don't know where he really fits on their recruiting board. I'd have to ask some questions out there, but he's a kid that I think could come in. He gives them some size and stuff. Another solid receiver. It'd be a nice get for them to get another kid like this.
Yeah, now I got to ask you a question. As you said, where does he fit? Right now, you've got Keon Coleman, and you could have Keon Coleman in house if that works out. You got Des Hill or Des Pazin in house as a receiver that's eligible for next year. You've got 4 kids committed for the 2024 class, but yet they're still offering receivers. They offer a receiver out of Texas. He's a state champion in the 200 meters. He's a Blazer. I watched his film. He's pretty fun to watch. What do you make of the continued offers out to 2024 receivers?
One, it looks like they feel like they're going to have attrition after this season, that room's going to be gutted a little bit, I'm sure. You have Johnny Wilson, who's going to end up in the NFL. They lost Pittman. I know they've added some guys. Maybe you see some transfers coming after this season, and they just want to continue to improve that room. I've always said you got to recruit at a position of strength, and the way you do that, you lock guys up early and you recruit over them if you think you could get someone better. You don't want to take plan C's. If these guys, a lot of them, maybe they feel like they're plan B guys that they can stick with right now, but somebody down the road's better. Or if the trader kid or someone like that wants to come, you're going to take those guys over the kids that are committed just because of the upside and what they're able to provide. Now, another thing you have to look at, some of these guys that they're recruiting, the McCoy kid that is out of Miami Central, Miami's still recruiting him, but he's someone that they could possibly play as a corner. They like the versatility of these guys. Maybe they're not having as much success recruiting defensive backs in this class, in their opinion. So, you know what? They're like, you know what? These guys can flip to the defensive side of the ball and give us some options. So it's no different than the O-line and D-line recruiting. You recruit as many D-linemen as you can, and some of them may slide over to that offensive line if you fall short on the numbers. So it's a good way to recruit. I like that way of recruiting as strength. I don't believe in just not taking anyone and then waiting, and then the guys you like are no longer there, and then the second-tier guys are no longer there, and you're on plan C. That's how your program falls to where Florida State fell before. You got to bring in numbers. They got numbers at the wide receiver position, and now they can sit there and wait and see if some better options are out there.
Yeah, I believe Nye played some corner last night. He does have great change of direction. He's got really good lateral movement, quickness, great feet. So that'll be interesting. And you're right. I think the kid out of Texas, Refugio, Texas. He's 5'8", 145 pounds. So that's the only problem with him. He's a small guy, but he can run. There's no doubt about that.
Teach speed.
You cannot teach speed. He's a state champion, 100 meters, and I think he's got a pretty good 200-meter time, too. But anyway, it's pretty fun to watch his film. All right, so obviously you another name to keep an eye on that was here this past weekend for an unofficial visit was Kylan Fox, the tight end. He's announced that he's going to it's down between three schools, Florida State being one of those. Sounds like he's going to announce on July 4th. So either one of us is not going to have the day off on July 4th because Kylan has hopefully he makes that decision before then. But, Florida State is in his top three. Just your thoughts on Kylan and Florida State's chances.
Yeah, I talked to you about this before. I have Landon Thomas 1A. I think this kid's 1B. He's very good. He could end up having a better career than Thomas. I really like the way that he can split out wide, become an option as a wide receiver. You could make him move him closer into the line of scrimmage and have him run down the seam. He's very athletic. He gives you versatility. He can block. He's an all around very good player. I think it's amazing. They went from once again, another position at tight end where there was a lot of question marks this year. They brought in 2 transfers. Now they're bringing in 2 high school guys. That's another room I think you're going to see a lot of movement after the season if these 2 kids come in.
All right, then all right, so we're going to go with some of your stock up, stock down stuff. All right, here in a second. Or if you don't want to do that, we'll do fish bits. It's going to be you. But I'm going to give you a stock up guy. I want you to watch his film. First of all, I want you to look at his picture that we have on the site. But anyway, a kid named Jaden Todd from West Lawrence, Georgia, offensive tackle. He is 6'5" or 6'6". I can't remember exactly what he said he measured at when he was on his unofficial visit, but he was over 300 pounds. If you go to our recruiting thread from last weekend, and there are pictures of Jaden, and there's actually pictures of Jaden on my Twitter account, at Osceola Pat. But anyway, West Lawrence High School, watch his film, Fish. I think you're going to really like the kid. He was a guy wanted to be a baseball player. He's a first baseman, so he's got the ability to move laterally. It was one of those high schools that no Florida State coach had been in for a while, I don't guess, and maybe the last couple of years. And Chris Thompson recruits that area, and he was up there. And coach goes, "I got a guy you got to meet." And of course, when you've been there, Fish, you've had coaches tell you that. I've had coaches tell me that over the years. When I was out in South Florida, I want to bring this kid to campus. And when I was high school relations at South Florida, and the kid shows up and he's nowhere near what you thought he was going to be. Well, Chris, apparently this Jaden Todd walked through the door and he's all of 6'6", 315. But anyway, he's from West Lawrence, Georgia High School. Take a look at him if you're Fish or if you're a Florida State fan. That is my stock up guy for our Wednesday show. But anyway, he looks like a really good athlete. He's very fun interview, very self-aware kid. Knows he's got some work to do on the football field. Knows baseball is not his future. He has figured that out at 6'6", 315. But anyway, Jaden Todd, West Lawrence High School. All right, Fish, you've been all over the state. You're doing all these reports on all these high schools. Any other kids that we have not talked about that you have updates on from a Florida State recruiting perspective, or guys that you're discovering for later classes that maybe our listeners, viewers would like to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think the two guys that have stood out this spring, Bryce Fitzgerald, he's from Bayland Jesuit, plays wide receiver, plays DB. One of these versatile guys, I think he's going to blow up this spring. I've already know that he's gotten a ton of offers. I think he's a 2025 or 26 kid. Jordan Campbell, a linebacker out of American High School. He's the best prospect they've had since Olivier Vernon. Just went to his scrimmage last week, and he was the first kid that stood out. You're talking a 6'3", 15, 20-pound kid. Just looks different. You talked about it with Landon. The guys that look different, that look like the Miamis, the Florida State type kids, that when you go to practice or a scrimmage, you don't have to ask the coach who they are. They just stand out. These are two of those guys. It's been, I've gone probably about 4 or 5 scrimmages, games, going to be going to more. I'll be able to give some more insight after this week. Most of the spring games start today and end up going through the weekend. I know there's a big jamboree up in Palm Beach that I'm going to be going to on Saturday. So overall, those are the two kids that have stood out that are underclassmen that I think Florida State will end up offering them both. There's a kid, Chavez Lee, out of Miami Palmetto. I know FSU needs linebackers. This is a kid I really think they should get on. I know the kid's kind of blown up as well. He's about 6'2", 200 pounds. One thing I like about the Lee kid is he can cover the flats, can cover deep down the middle. He's an athletic kid. He looks more, he plays more like a DB, but has the body of a linebacker. He could come up and play the run. He's physical. He's a kid to keep an eye on out of Miami Palmetto. He was at LaSalle High School last year. I think he's someone that could come to camp and earn an offer. Florida State needs to improve that linebacker room. I think guys like this do that.
Yeah, and Fish, I'm pretty sure you saw where this, you may not have, but the quarterback out of Lexington, Kentucky, Cutter Boley, who's been on Florida State's campus as recently as the spring practice period in March or April. I can't remember exactly when he was in town. I want to say it was towards the end of spring camp. He has he's a 2025 quarterback, but he has cut down his list of schools to 5, and Florida State is in that list. So Florida State continues to recruit quarterbacks at a very high level, and they've got a commitment for 2025 already in Tramel Jones. Yeah. So looks like you may be right. Looks like they may you and I had talked. You thought they might take 2 quarterbacks. And then, of course, they've also got some other quarterbacks on that offer list for 2025. But anyway, that is a update on a quarterback. Any thoughts on Cutter? I don't know how much time you've had to.
I haven't had a chance. I do know there was a kid that we discussed earlier this year, Carter Smith. Yep. Carter, he was told that Florida State, that Tramel's their guy. Carter still wants to, from my contacts there, he still wants to go to Florida State. He's going to go to their camp this summer. He feels he can outperform any of the other quarterbacks. He wants to prove himself to that staff because that's where he wants to go. If he doesn't go to Florida State, it's most likely a Miami or Florida type thing because he wants to stay in state. But from my contacts, he wants to go to the Florida State camp, prove himself that he's the number 1 guy in the state for 2025.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we'll have obviously a lot more as you and I continue to go watch prospects, not only here in Tallahassee, but down there in South Florida. But listen, I don't know if you have any take on it whatsoever, but obviously ACC spring meetings are this week. And one of the stories coming out of yesterday's meetings is that Florida State is happy with an asterisk about potentially being in the ACC long term. They're talking about, if you read the article, several different revenue sharing models. Looks like Mike Alford saying all the right things about Florida State being part of this, but he always said that the revenue sharing would likely be a work in progress from year to year, which, what's your read on all that? Is it I've read all kind of things on Twitter about people saying this is a good thing, this is a bad thing. Just at face value, how do you read into this?
I think the revenue share is just a Band-Aid. They're going to have to rip that thing off. At the end of the day, Florida State needs to get out of the ACC, or the ACC needs to merge with one of the other conferences and generate more money. Florida State cannot compete with the difference. And I know that's probably what the Florida State people, the Clemson people, the 7 schools that decided to group together in the ACC this week, they realize that if they want to compete on the national level for national championships, that revenue the disparity has to shrink. They don't need to make as much as those other conferences, but they got to be in shouting distance of those schools. If those schools are making 80, 90, 100 million a year or above that, Florida State's got to be in the 70, 80 million, 60 to 80 range where they can at least compete. They don't need a ton of money. Florida State's always done a good job of having success with what the resources they have. But once that disparity starts to kick in over the next 4 or 5 years, it's going to start to hurt. There's no way around it. You got to be able to compete, and the only way you're going to compete is to get out of the conference.
Hey, listen, I was on the road last night. I haven't had time to research it. You've been on the road all week. My whole listen is increased revenue is obviously good for Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, whoever, and it's supposed to be. Apparently, it's going to be merit based. Everything, I guess, except the television revenue would be merit-based. So, my concern is that water down the ACC. Does it make it bottom-heavy? The ACC loses. We didn't work in the Big 12. They lost Oklahoma and Texas. We've seen that model, a similar model in the Big 12. But does it water down the ACC to the point where top talent is not going to come into this league because you only got 2 or 3 teams on a yearly basis that can compete on the football landscape?
Well, I think kids are going to still want to go to Florida State, Clemson.
Well, yeah, I get that. But I'm talking about the league as a whole.
Yeah, I think the league as a whole, it's going to hurt because these kids are going to have other options. They're going to have more money at their disposal. They're going to be able to pay. As those schools start to generate more and more money, their NIL collectives start to generate more and more money. There's more money to go around. They can spread that money around to that football program. The schools in the bottom of the conferences, whether it's an Indiana, the Rutgers of the world, the Northwesterns, they're going to be able to compete. If Vanderbilt is making $100 million a year and Florida State's only making $60 million a year, it's still that $40 million is going to allow them, one, to hire and fire coaches that don't work out. They're going to be able to have more resources to give it to those football players. Listen, if a football player now, this NIL is a big deal. If there's more money for Vanderbilt to give them, is Florida State going to lose every kid to Vanderbilt? No, but that they're going to have the ability, if they want, at that university to compete at a high level and land some kids that maybe would have thought otherwise in years past if that money's there.
All right. Well, it's going to be fascinating. We will have more on that from Bob Ferrante and Kurt Weiler, who are in Amelia Island covering the ACC meetings. They will likely be either hosting the show themselves or be guests when me hosting on Friday at 12:30. But first, let's get some really important stuff. How are the Fort Lauderdale White Sox doing?
Oh man, our season ended last night, man. So it did not go well. My son made a play at third base, and a kid spiked him in the shin and took him out in the first inning. So he was done after one inning. It was an unfortunate situation. He made a great play to tag the kid out, but our kids imploded, man. So it just was one of those things.
So will the White Sox be retaining their manager after this season?
Probably not. I'll get fired, but it's okay, man. I have other things to do. So
you do. Yeah, you do have to help us. That is true. All right. So another important question for you: do the Miami Heat have any chance at knocking off the Boston Celtics and go to the NBA Finals?
I mean, you watch them, and I swear, I've never seen a team that has they have a guy from the YMCA on their team. I'm not joking. They got this kid guy. I don't even know the guy's name. He's like number 44. He wears a headband. They are the most unimpressive looking team I've ever seen in the conference finals, but they keep finding a way to win. I said, I'm a Sixer fan, and I'm thinking, how do the Sixers lose to the Celtics? And this Heat team has nowhere near the talent that the Sixers have, but they keep finding ways to win. Jimmy Butler's a great player, but the four other guys next to him, I don't know if they'd start for any other team in the league other than maybe Bam.
Well, as you know, the officiating in the NBA is quite questionable, and television ratings are very important to the NBA. Is there any chance at all that we see Denver versus Miami in the NBA Finals?
There's a chance, but I think you'll start to see. I'll be very surprised if the Lakers don't have like 50 free throws in Game 2.
Last night the Nuggets. I did see I got home early, about 11-ish from Colquitt, and I did see where the Lakers were up by like 14 with like 4 minutes to go, and so I left where I was and drove home. I had stopped to pick something up, and when I got home, it was a 2-point game, a 3-point game.
Joker will foul out by halftime in the next game, or he'll have like 5 fouls by halftime.
Yeah, call me jaded, call me conspiracy theorist, but I have a feeling we're going to see Boston and L.A. in that NBA Finals. So we'll see. I would like to see the Nuggets. I want to see Nugget Heat just because it would be the chaos of the NBA playoff model. But anyway, listen, I think it's going to be Boston, L.A. I think somehow it'll figure itself out. But anyway, it's going to be fun to watch. But all right, Fish, I know you got to hit the road, and I appreciate you joining us. If you're not a subscriber to the Osceola, but you do listen to our podcast/videocast, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. Fish will have his fish bits on there, his stock up, stock down reports. We'll have video of Landon Thomas later in the week. We're expecting that there could be some visits this weekend. We're trying to get confirmation on that. They had 7 unofficial visits here last week. 5 unofficial visits here last weekend. If they're here, we will be over there at the Moore Center trying to check it out and get interviews with some of these kids as they're leaving. If not, we'll be back on Friday, but then be back again on Monday. But Fish, travel safe today. Thank you for joining me, and thank you guys for listening.